PLAR at UFE is such a benefit to our students. All of our UFE students after acceptance are eligible for prior learning assessment and recognition. It's about trying, though, getting themselves organized. Sometimes it could take that long to gather documentation or their validation or letters of validation from, let's say, previous employers. It's okay. When you are ready, we are ready to help support you.
All right. Hi, friends. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Know Your Rights. I am Gurpreet, your Vice President External. And in this episode, I will be interviewing Amanda Roberts from the Office of Vice Provost. Amanda, could you please tell us about yourself and your role here at UFE?
Sure. First, thank you so very much for inviting me to this conversation and sharing what prior learning assessment and recognition is at UFE. I am Amanda Roberts, and I've been with University of the Fraser Valley for just over 5 years, but prior learning assessment and recognition has been my career now for a couple of decades.
Thank you for sharing that. Before we jump right into the conversation, could you also let students know what is the best way to contact you?
Sure. The best way to contact me is through your email. And so you can send us an email at plar@ufv.ca. And also you can go through our UFE website at ufe.ca/PLAR.
Absolutely, good to know. So to start off with, what is PLAR and what does it stand for?
Sure, that's excellent question. There are so many acronyms, so we'll start with prior learning assessment and recognition, PLAR. It is literally as it sounds. So when a student has prior learning that is outside of the context of formal learning, so formal would be university or college learning, it then falls into a category of prior learning assessment. And then the R in PLAR is really what we all want and what our students want, and that's recognition. In Canada, depending on the province or the territory, depending on even if you've been at a college, polytechnic, or university, you can hear terms such as RPL, which is recognition of prior learning, CPL, credit for prior learning. In the province of Quebec or French-speaking communities or colleges or universities speak about RAC, which is a recognition of acquired competence, but that actually translates loosely to a recognition of your knowledge and skills.
Perfect. That was absolutely amazing.
Good.
Who is eligible and can apply for PLAR?
Yes, all of our UFE students after acceptance are eligible for prior learning assessment and recognition. It does not matter if you're in a certificate, diploma, bachelor, or master's program. Post-admission, that's when you can reach out and formally start your application for PLAR.
Good to know. Next question would be, what types of learning does the policy recognize?
So this is where it can get technical, and I'll speak about the technicalities and what's written in our policy, but I'm going to make it real world. So we have what we will consider in PLAR for the types of assessment: formal, informal, and non-formal. So what formal learning is, when you come to UFE, you've probably gone through the BC transfer system or through a transfer of credit system. And those credits have been probably already recognized by our team in the OREG office. Then what happens is if some of those courses aren't recognized, they can be used in combination what would be seen as what's informal and non-formal. It could be volunteer. Maybe you've gone, maybe you have a certification. Maybe you've done workplace training. It could be cultural learning. It is quite a depth and breadth of what you know and can do and how you've come to learn something that has been outside of that formal context of like a college, polytechnic, or university.
Perfect. Thanks for listing out those categories there.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of assessments might be used in PLAR evaluation?
Yeah, so a student can expect the unexpected of types of assessments. Mm-hmm. So not every assessment in prior learning assessment is going to be the same. We offer a variety from everything from I'm going to say it's the easiest, although it doesn't feel like the easiest when you're doing it. It could be a challenge examination is one form of a prior learning assessment they could go through. So we're very familiar with challenge examinations. The other form of assessment, it could be just like this. It could be a one-on-one interview. It could be a dialogue. It could be cultural knowledge being shared through storytelling, where you're sitting with our subject matter experts who are our faculty members that are doing the assessment or evaluation process of what you know and can do. Another way could be portfolio. It also could be in a formal context. That also can be digital. It could be a package per se. Maybe some of our older students would be used to presenting a binder like of a physical portfolio, whereas perhaps, later on we've become more used to digital portfolios and submitting links to, here's some evidence pieces that prove I know and can do this topic that I'm trying to get recognition in.
Perfect. Again, thanks for listing those categories out there.
Yeah.
It's very important to have those portfolios for the students in order to have PLAR.
Absolutely. It's critical for that assessment.
Absolutely. Next question would be, can every UFE course be challenged to PLAR? If not, how do students know which ones qualify?
Perfect. So no, not all courses at UFE can be recognized through the PLAR process. However, most are at UFE. How students can find that out is when you go onto ufb.ca and look into your course outlines page, or on your first day of classes when your faculty member is providing you with the learning outcomes that you can expect to learn in that semester. On the first page of your official course outline, towards the bottom right-hand side, there's a box that says, is this course eligible for prior learning assessment? It will simply state yes or no. And then it talks about transfer credit and then the types of assessments that are available. So very easy to find.
Perfect. In my time at UFE, everybody has told me that please look at your course outline whenever you're getting in the course. One of the reasons why you have to look at it.
Yeah.
Next question would be, how does a typical PLAR process look like from start to finish?
So a typical one, again, PLAR is very gray, and we try to make it as as clear as possible. However, just as individual as every single one of our students are that come to UFE, the process typically, in a very clear role, looks like a student would be admitted to UFE, and then they start having these meaningful conversations with their program or educational advisors. So typically, a student will have learned about transfer of credit and then prior learning assessment through their program advisors. Another pathway that a student can figure it out is in that first couple of days of that first week of class, a student will be in class and the faculty member might say, if you're looking through, again, your course outlines, there might be 7 learning outcomes. When we review these 7 learning outcomes of what you're going to expect to learn this term, if you have this experience, come and speak to me during office hours, or you can also reach out to the prior learning assessment office and get some guidance there. So there's multiple ways that a student can, again, the gray ways that they can have so there's multiple pathways that they can access prior learning assessment.
Good to know. What kind of evidence or documentation does a student need to prepare for PLAR?
So that goes back to the types of assessments.
Yes.
Again, it's incredibly really gray. It really depends on the student themselves. We might have some students that have an actual certificate, and that certificate tends to have like non-credit hours attached to it, but there might be really formal learning outcomes that go with that non-credit certificate. Some of them could be in apprentices or in like continuing education courses. So that would be an evidence piece that a student could present to us. And that may just be enough for a faculty member to go, okay, now tell us how you've applied that learning, since those were ungraded. Tell us how you've applied that learning and how you actually know to do this at your workplace, or what you've brought forward to here to UFE, and what is that learning that's occurred? I think it's important to note that when we speak about prior learning experience, we're not granting credit for your experience, whether it was a great experience, poor experience, challenging experience. We're granting credit for the learning that has occurred and show us how you can demonstrate that you've grasped that learning and how have you applied it in real world situations. That's what we're granting you recognition for.
Thank you for that clarification again.
Yeah.
How are PLAR results recorded on transcripts?
Perfect. So that's really important. The student can expect to get what's a CR, and that stands for credit rating. So they will be granted the credit hours of what that course would have been. However, they will not be receiving a grade.
Okay, interesting. Another factor when students think about PLAR or taking upon a course in general is a factor of fees. The next question would be, is there a fee for PLAR and what does it cover?
Yeah, so the prior learning assessment fee differs in all post-secondaries in the province and in across Canada. So our current fee at UFE is 75% of what the tuition would be. So the benefit of a student wanting to pursue PLAR, it definitely can save them that course tuition. So it would be 75% of what they could have expected to be in class paying full course tuition.
It's actually great. They say 25% of the tuition if they
Yes.
go through PLAR. Can PLAR credits affect things like GPA, student loans, scholarships, or Dean's List eligibility?
Absolutely. So that's also really critical. When a student gets a CR, because they're not getting a letter grade, that has a direct impact on their GPA. It has no impact on their GPA. So, for example, scholarship students might have a caveat saying you must keep a 4.0 GPA in order to be eligible for the scholarship. And what happens is if you go through a PLAR process and are granted PLAR, you get that CR, you get the credits, but that CR isn't going to elevate that GPA, or it's not going to be a detriment to that GPA. So there is no detriment. Also, if a student does not get credit for a course, if they go through the process and it was determined that they weren't successful, the student is going to get an NCR. That NCR does not show on a learner's transcript. We at UFE have determined that we're not making this a punitive process for students to go through. We will note it internally here at UFE, but when they leave us and they have this transcript, and if they want to continue for their learning at a different university, they're not going to be penalized for having an NCR for possibly not getting credit or recognition for PLAR.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's actually very valuable for a student to know if they go through a PLAR process, that would have no effect on their GPA.
Yeah, it's not a detrimental process.
Yeah. Next would be, if a question disagrees with the PLAR decision, what is the appeal process?
The appeal process is like a typical course grade process. So we follow the same policies and procedures at UFE. So make sure that you know your rights and know your policies and procedures. And that is, you would go back to either through the PLAR office, or you can go right back to your faculty member who's completed that assessment and ask for another review. So we will go through another review process, have another faculty member that is a subject matter expert review your portfolio or that submission type that you presented to us, do another unbiased assessment, and then ensure that the determination was correct the first time, or perhaps there is credit that can be granted going forward into the future. And then that also sometimes may involve the associate dean or the dean in that program.
Good to know. That brings me to the end of my questions. Are there any final words that you would like to share with our students watching our episode?
Sure. Prior learning assessment and recognition is it's such a value to our students, and UFE truly believes in our students and wants to recognize and provide alternative pathways as well as access into their programs and make that access in those pathways much more simple. So PLAR at UFE is such a benefit to our students. So that would be the first piece. The second piece that I would offer to our students is just try it. Again, I spoke about how gray, prior learning assessment, or recognition of prior learning, all of these terms can seem daunting and quite overwhelming. It is a process that can be broken down by our superstar academic advisors, the program advisors. So just try. And on that, I want to make it really normal that the first time a student will reach out and ask for prior learning assessment, they will sometimes not initiate actually going through the process for months and sometimes it's for a year. And that is okay. It's about trying, though, getting themselves organized. Sometimes it could take that long to gather documentation or their validation or letters of validation from, let's say, previous employers. It's okay. When you are ready, we are ready to help support you.
That's absolutely amazing words. I would definitely point out that this is an amazing resource that UFE has, which a lot of students out there are yet to be known about. It's an unknown resource, very valuable for a student to utilize in their life at UFE. But again, thanks for coming along to have this conversation with us and have me interview you. And absolutely love the advice and love the thoughts that you have shared for this video.
For sure.
And for our viewers, thank you again for tuning in for another episode of Know Your Rights.